Sanskrit is often described as an ancient Indian language, but that phrase barely captures its importance. For more than 3,000 years, Sanskrit has carried prayers, philosophy, law, poetry, scientific thought, political prestige, and cultural memory across Asia. It is the sacred language of Hinduism, a major language of classical Hindu philosophy, and an important historical language for Buddhist and Jain texts. Yet Sanskrit was not only a religious language. It also functioned as a link language across ancient and medieval South Asia, allowing ideas to travel between regions with different spoken tongues. When Hindu and Buddhist culture spread beyond India, Sanskrit traveled with it into Southeast Asia, Central Asia, and East Asia. Its influence can still be heard today in formal vocabulary, ritual phrases, names, literature, and intellectual traditions far beyond the place where it first developed. To understand Sanskrit, we have to start with its language family. Sanskrit belongs to the Indo-Aryan branch of the Indo-European languages. That means it is historically related, however distantly, to languages as different as Greek, Latin, Persian, English, and many modern languages of northern India. Its earliest ancestors moved into South Asia from the northwest during the Late Bronze Age. These language communities entered through regions around present-day northern Afghanistan, northern Pakistan, and northwestern India, then gradually moved eastward. Sanskrit did not appear in isolation. It emerged from earlier Indo-Aryan speech forms while interacting with the languages already present in the subcontinent. This matters because Sanskrit is not a frozen miracle from nowhere. It is a language shaped by migration, contact, memory, and adaptation. The oldest layer of Sanskrit is called Vedic Sanskrit. It is preserved most famously in the Rig Veda, a collection of 1,028 hymns composed roughly between 1500 and 1200 BCE. These hymns were created by Indo-Aryan communities moving across the northwestern parts of the subcontinent. The Rig Veda is not just old religious poetry. It is one of the most important linguistic time capsules in the world. Its words, grammar, and poetic formulas preserve a very ancient stage of Indo-European speech. Scholars compare Vedic Sanskrit with old Iranian texts like the Avestan Gathas and even with early Greek epic language, including the world of Homer. The similarities do not mean these cultures were the same, but they reveal deep historical connections reaching back to a shared linguistic ancestry. One reason Vedic Sanskrit is so valuable is the way it was preserved. The Rig Veda was transmitted orally through extremely rigorous systems of memorization. This was not casual recitation. It involved precise methods designed to protect pronunciation, word order, rhythm, and even tiny grammatical details across generations. Because of this, the text survived with extraordinary fidelity, often described as having no major variant readings in the way many ancient manuscripts do. For linguists, that preservation is priceless. The archaic grammar of Vedic Sanskrit helps reconstruct Proto-Indo-European, the common ancestor of many languages across Europe and Asia. In other words, Sanskrit is not only important to Indian history. It is also a key piece in understanding how a huge portion of the world's languages evolved. As Vedic Sanskrit entered the Indian subcontinent, it changed through contact with local languages. The speakers encountered new plants, animals, landscapes, and cultural realities, and the language absorbed names for things that were new to them. Ancient Dravidian languages also influenced Sanskrit, especially in sound patterns and sentence structure. This point is important because people often imagine ancient classical languages as pure and untouched. Sanskrit's history shows the opposite. Even a language later treated as sacred and prestigious was shaped by contact. Its development reflects a multilingual world where communities exchanged words, sounds, ideas, and habits of speech. Sanskrit became influential partly because it adapted, absorbed, and then reorganized those influences into powerful literary and religious forms. When people say Sanskrit today, they often mean classical Sanskrit. This is the polished, standardized form that emerged around the middle of the first millennium BCE. Its most famous codifier was the grammarian Pliny, whose work, the Adhi, means 8 chapters. PNES grammar is one of the most sophisticated grammatical systems ever produced in the ancient world. It did not merely list correct forms. It described the language through compact rules that could generate proper Sanskrit expressions with remarkable precision. This standardization gave Sanskrit enormous stability. It allowed scholars, poets, priests, and philosophers across different regions to share a common learned language. Classical Sanskrit became a tool of high culture because it was disciplined, prestigious, and teachable. Classical Sanskrit became the language of some of South Asia's greatest literary and intellectual achievements. The poet and dramatist Kalidasa, often regarded as the greatest writer in Sanskrit drama and poetry, composed in this refined language. Sanskrit was also used to express philosophy, mathematics, ritual theory, grammar, law, astronomy, medicine, and aesthetics. Even the foundations of modern arithmetic were first described in classical Sanskrit. That does not mean Sanskrit alone invented every idea it carried, but it became one of the major vehicles through which technical and abstract knowledge was organized. Its prestige made it attractive for thinkers who wanted their work to be understood across elite networks. Sanskrit was not just beautiful, it was a working language of knowledge. Sanskrit also exists in a more flexible storytelling form known as epic Sanskrit. The two great Sanskrit epics, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, were not composed in exactly the same register as PNES idealized classical Sanskrit. They grew out of oral storytelling traditions used in northern India roughly between 400 BCE and 300 CE. These epics are not merely long stories. They became cultural universes, containing questions about duty, kingship, family loyalty, war, morality, divine action, and human weakness. Their language helped carry Sanskrit beyond narrow scholarly circles and into the imaginative life of society. Epic Sanskrit shows that the language was not only a polished tool of experts, but also a medium for grand narrative and cultural identity. Over time, Sanskrit became deeply tied to religion and ritual. In Hinduism, it became the language of sacred hymns, liturgy, philosophical debate, and temple culture. In Buddhism and Jainism, Sanskrit also played an important historical role, especially in learned texts and intellectual traditions. Its sacred status helped preserve it, but it also changed its social function. The more Sanskrit became associated with tradition, authority, and ritual correctness, the less it behaved like an ordinary spoken language that evolves freely in daily life. Later generations learned it through education, recitation, and scholarship rather than simply absorbing it as a mother tongue at home. This gave Sanskrit extraordinary continuity, but also gradually separated it from everyday speech. Sanskrit's influence did not stop at India's borders. As Hindu and Buddhist ideas moved into Southeast Asia, Central Asia, and East Asia, Sanskrit vocabulary, names, concepts, and inscriptions moved with them. In some regions, Sanskrit became a language of political prestige and elite culture. Rulers used Sanskrit to associate themselves with cosmic order, learning, legitimacy, and sacred power. Local languages did not disappear, but Sanskrit shaped their formal registers and religious vocabulary. This is why Sanskrit-derived words appear in many Asian languages, especially in learned, ceremonial, religious, or royal contexts. Its spread was not simply linguistic. It was part of a wider transmission of art, mythology, statecraft, ritual, and intellectual life across Asia. One surprising fact about Sanskrit is that it has no single ancient native script. The language was first preserved orally, and when it came to be written, it appeared in different Brahmic scripts depending on region and period. Around the turn of the first millennium CE, Sanskrit was being written in several scripts across South Asia and beyond. In the modern era, it is most commonly associated with Devanagari, the script also used for Hindi and other Indian languages. This means Sanskrit should not be confused with one writing system. The language is older than its common modern script. Its identity lies in its sound, grammar, vocabulary, and tradition, not in one alphabet or one visual form. Today, Sanskrit occupies a unique position. It is recognized in India's constitution as one of the 8th schedule languages, and it is still taught in schools, universities, and traditional gurukulas. The Banaras Sanskrit College, founded in 1791 during East India Company rule, reflects its long institutional history. Yet Sanskrit is no longer a normal first language for a large community. In modern Indian censuses, several thousand people have reported Sanskrit as their mother tongue, but scholars often interpret these numbers as expressions of cultural prestige rather than evidence of everyday native speech. Still, Sanskrit is far from dead in a simple sense. It lives in ritual, chanting, scholarship, names, philosophy, literature, and the structure of many modern languages. Its story is not only about the past. It is about how a language can survive as memory, authority, and cultural power. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.